Members of the Esoteric Order of Gamers, it's the Joy of Unpacking episode 3, and we're powering through the unpacking here. There's so much going on behind the scenes here, but I don't want to film everything because that wouldn't be very exciting. It'd be just hours of me unpacking things and putting them into organised spaces, and you don't want to watch that. So we're just doing the highlights here. Now you might notice if you've watched the other videos that there seems to be a bit more space. What's going on? Well, actually I'm stretching out through this room. I'm sort of going into the corners and I'm reorganising things, and you can see the boxes behind me I'm organising into publishers. So I've got a couple of Fantasy Flight Game boxes there. We've got a miscellaneous box there. There's Z-Man stuff there. There's Days of Wonder stuff over there. And I'm kind of organising it, and I'm writing down the names of the games on the outside of the cardboard box so I can get to things pretty quickly, because it'll be a while before these are all beautifully organised on shelves, and I really want to be able to get to my games if I need to quite quickly. So let's get on with the unpacking. There's lots of great stuff to look at this episode. Let's have a look at it. Well, there's a whole lot of tasty gaming treats in this box, starting with Star Wars Epic Duels. Yes, this relatively straightforward game was very, very popular on eBay a little while back, and probably still fetches quite high prices. Let's have a look inside. I think I've just given it one game. I've really got to try it again. Well, that's the kind of careful packing that pays dividends. You can see it's all being padded out with paper and silica gel in this case. And I've got decks of cards with various characters. And it came with a whole pack of great little pre-painted miniatures. Really straightforward minis, but fun ones. And, oh look, more cards. There you go. And some nice board sections. Yes, I think I'll get that on the table next week for sure. Star Wars Epic Duels. Here's another not quite golden oldie. Dungeons & Dragons The Fantasy Adventure board game. Parker's answer to Hero Quest game that made so much money. Let's have a look inside. Lots of miniatures, haven't painted them yet. Hasn't really received a lot of love, this game, just yet. In fact, I don't think I've played it. But it's a fun sort of Hero Quest type game. And I actually have 2 expansions for it. Let's see if I can find them. They're over here somewhere. And I think I put them... Ah, there they are. There's the Eternal Winter expansion pack and the Forbidden Forest expansion pack. And I've actually painted the 2 expansions for some reason, but not the base game. Well, things are getting a bit more special as we delve deeper into this box. And here's Star Wars The Queen's Gambit. And as you can see, this one came with a pile of stuff. There's these multiple boards, lots and lots of figures. Lots of little Roger androids. There's pillars because it was like a 3D board arrangement. More figures in there. Lots of cards. Wow, really a lot of value in this set. And a bit of a collector's item these days, I believe. Star Wars Risk that came out recently is sort of in this tradition, but you certainly don't get the pile of stuff that you got with this version. Great game, Star Wars Queen's Gambit. Well, we're really starting to go back in time now, and I love these games. 1980, one of the very first board games I bought. Great little game, fantastic artwork. Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, another like 3D classic. It has a 3D pyramid thing in it. The original Chaos Marauders, later remade by Fantasy Flight Games. Judge Dredd, a great little board game. A lot of fun. Someone should really bring it back again. There's more in this box here. I love this period of gaming. Here's the original edition of Warrior Knights. Again, later remade by Fantasy Flight Games. Really fun game. Blood Royale. This copy means a lot to me. A guy I knew in Sydney who was a gaming friend of mine had a fantastic collection of games. Really impressive collection. He was just as obsessive as I am about games. Very sadly took his own life some years ago, and he gave me this copy of Blood Royale. So this particular game means a lot to me, and as I think of him every time I see it, it's a great game, and it's so good to have it in my collection, and I was so grateful that he gave it to me. Fury of Dracula is another fantastic game. This is the original Games Workshop edition. Had a lot of fun playing this one, especially on dark nights with appropriate candles and atmosphere. As you know, this has gone through several editions now. The latest edition is fantastic and still a lot of fun. Warlock of Firetop Mountain, the Steve Jackson presents. This is, of course, based on the fighting fantasy book, and as a fun little romp through a dungeon. Chainsaw Warrior, a solo board game. It was revolutionary at the time, but it's a pretty boring, silly game, but there you go, it was fun. Dungeon Quest, the original edition of Dungeon Quest, again remade by Fantasy Flight a couple of times. Blockmania, this was based in, of course, Mega City 1 of Judge Dredd fame, and there's an expansion called Mega Mania, which I have. And this was a great period. This is when Games Workshop were licensing 2000 AD comic characters like Judge Dredd and some others, which we'll see soon. And of course, Battle Cars. This really is an old favourite of mine, Battle Cars. I love it so much that I've actually blown it up to Matchbox car scale, because the cars are very tiny in the original game. So I've blown it up to large scale, and Will is coming over soon for some gaming. Hopefully we'll film a battle report of that, because we've had a lot of fun times playing Battle Cars. And finally, Valley of the Four Winds. This is pretty obscure. 1980 it came out, and I bought this about the same time as Warlock. It's a war game of sorts with cardboard chits. Way back in the early days, one of the first Games Workshop games I ever bought. Rogue Trooper, again based on another 2000 AD property. That's not a bad little game, actually. A friend of mine spilt a drink on it once when we were playing the game, way back in the 80s, and it became known forever after as Rogue Drinker. Talisman, the Magical Quest game. This is the original edition of Talisman, and packed in this box are quite a few of the expansions, if not all of the expansions as well, all squeezed into that box. But this was the original artwork. Fantastic style of art there. Great. I believe Games Workshop is going to make a new version of this again. So many versions of Talisman. And then getting away from Games Workshop, just at the end we've got an original edition of Frank Herbert's Dune, which Fantasy Flight redid the mechanics in a game called Rex, but this is the original and best, themed after Frank Herbert's Dune. An amazing game and a bit of a classic. Well, of course, the years flew by, and with them my teens and early 20s, and Games Workshop kept making fantastic games. They moved from the small boxes up to the big boxes, and they brought out game after game, most of them just classics. You can see here we've got Dark Future. There's rumours about this one being remade, who knows. It was a weird kind of game when it first came out, but it had great car models, and I want to give it another go and see what it's like. We've got Adeptus Titanicus. This was a great game, and it was the start of the epic scale Warhammer 40k stuff. That is the 6mm scale, and that came with these large titans. Again, Forge World, I believe, is making new titans for a new Adeptus Titanicus system. Who knows what's going to happen there. It's great to see Games Workshop going back into their past and rediscovering some of these great games. Titan Legions came afterwards, and it had these huge titans. There's one of each in here, and it was a... Look, back in these days, Games Workshop had so many rules, it was almost impossible to keep track of them all, and expansions used to appear in White Dwarf. I used to buy 2 copies of White Dwarf. I'd keep one, and the other one I would chop up and put into various folders matching the different games. Yes, that's kind of how obsessive I was. And Mighty Empires, a game in itself, but also a campaign system for Warhammer. Over here, we've got Warhammer Quest, one of the later versions of the Warhammer Quest system. Again, Games Workshop is churning out new Warhammer Quest type games now. There's a new one has just been announced. Under there is Advanced Hero Quest, which came out after Hero Quest. Games Workshop did this more advanced version of the Hero Quest system. It's a completely different game, but great Dungeon Delver, a bit of a classic. Gorka Morka, one of their less successful games, didn't really last long. It's orcs and vehicular combat. And what else have we got here? Oh, Space Hulk. This is version 3, I believe, or is it 2? I think this is 2. I did have the original copy when this new one came out. I foolishly got all the bits that I wanted to save from the first edition. I put it in the second edition box, so I don't think I still have my first edition box. But again, it's been superseded by a third edition. So these are just great games to have, but you don't necessarily play them all the time because a lot of them have newer versions, which are usually a little bit better. Back in these days, as I said, the games were quite involved. It certainly was a hobby, and there was a lot to do to keep track of the rules, and it wasn't really sort of something you took on lightly when you played one of the games, but they were still great fun. I tell you what, why don't you tell me in the comments which games you'd like me to open up and have a look at inside. That'd be great. And then we can go into more detail, because if I do them all, we'll be here forever. And finally, just to wrap up this very Games Workshop oriented episode, you'll see I've got lots of boxes of White Dwarf issues. I've got every issue from number 1 to 283, and quite a few of the ones from then until now. And you can see here, here's issue number 1. That's June, July 1977. Issue number 1 of White Dwarf. Very proud to have this one and all the ones following. There was a time when White Dwarf had articles about all kinds of things. Look, there's an article on Metamorphosis Alpha, which I've got a copy of, and it was a very exciting time in gaming, I have to say. Anyway, that's probably the subject of a completely different episode. As it is, we've come to the end of episode number 3. I hope you've enjoyed it, and there's lots more to come. Please keep commenting. I really appreciate your comments, and it's great to hear from you, and I'm really glad that people are enjoying this little unpacking of games and all the little discoveries we're making together. And don't forget, folks, put in a vote for the game that you'd like to see unpacked in more detail. It might be one of those big Games Workshop games. It might be any other game. Let me know. If I've got it, I'll unpack it. See you next time.